Hello, podcast listeners. I'm Jeff Davis. On this episode, I'm heading north from my home in Sonoma County into Southern Oregon. We're going rogue as we venture out on the wine road.
What we try and do with all of our whites is plenty of acid, but yet have that depth, that roundness.
That's great, yeah.
So that's the goal anyway. Whether or not we accomplish it each year is,
That's where the art comes in.
That's exactly, yeah.
The wine, the food, the ambiance are all here to facilitate a good conversation and camaraderie between people. And we see that.
Last August, my wife and I took a road trip to Southern Oregon's Rogue Valley wine region and stayed in the picturesque town of Ashland. I met up with Dan Marca of Dancin Vineyards, who offer quite a menu, both wine and food, and I sat with Eric Weisinger, who has been at his well-established family winery since he was a kid. These interviews will give you a good idea of what's going on in the Rogue Valley AVA of Southern Oregon. Now, why is it taking me so long to upload this podcast version of the radio show that aired in August? Just as I was getting ready to prepare the podcast version, fires broke out in several locations of Southern Oregon, including the Rogue Valley. The wineries I covered escaped harm, thankfully, but the fires torched the towns of Phoenix and Talent, southeast of Medford along Route 99, which was a road we traveled several times while staying in Ashland. So it didn't seem like the best time to promote the region. Then winter was approaching, and I decided to wait until it was sunny and warm again. And now COVID is getting under control, and people have the desire to travel once more. So let's get to it. I'll start with Dan Marca, who with his wife Cindy own Dancin Vineyards, a clever name from the owners, Dan and Sin. We sat in their covered open-air piazza, one of numerous seating areas they have at Dancin Vineyards. As you may have heard on my podcast several times, serendipity, or just good luck, plays a key role in many successes within the wine industry. Dan has two such stories, and we'll start with those.
So I was a construction guy in Sacramento, and had an architect friend of mine tell me that I should go down to Monterey and check out the beautiful area. So I did, and started looking at property with a real estate agent, and being Italian, and I'm always hungry. And one of the questions I asked the real estate agent was, where do you eat around here? And she thought, and out of the hundreds and hundreds of restaurants that are in the Monterey area, in the Monterey Peninsula, she mentioned two, Peppers and Fandango, both in Pacific Grove. So after a while, we decided to go to Fandango. We sat outside. It was a beautiful sunny day. Had a great paella meal. And on the way out, this beautiful server with a high ponytail, beautiful blonde, comes out of the restaurant and says, "Hey, have a nice day." And I'm looking at her, and yeah, have a nice day too. That was the first meeting with Cindy. So we continued to look at property and touring around, and finally decided to say, hey, I've got to get back. It was a Sunday afternoon in March 1995. I need to get back. I have meetings the next day. So I'm on Highway 1, and I get a call from the real estate agent. She says, "Hey, where are you?" I said, "I'm on Highway 1. She goes, "I have bad news for you." "What's that?" "The road's closed. There's a detour." What I didn't realize was that they just had a major El Nino event. And even though it was sunny out, water was still cascading off the hillside, and it had flooded Highway 1. So there was a detour, so I'm headed back south, and I thought, hey, not a big deal. I'll take 68 to Salinas and then get on the 101. But 68 was flooded. Yeah. So the other option was take 1 south and figure out a way to get across the mountain. But that was the year the Carmel River Bridge was washed out. I had no idea. Had I known this, I wouldn't have been there. So check back into the hotel, do a workout. I was with a good friend of mine, and I asked him, I said, hey, where do you want to eat? Well, I don't know. Where do you want to eat? It's that usual exchange. Well, why don't we go to the other place the real estate agent mentioned, Peppers. So we walk into Peppers, and we look at the restaurant, and then we kind of gaze over to the bar, and who's tending bar? The same blonde with the ponytail from the first restaurant. So out of the hundreds of restaurants she could have mentioned, she mentioned the 2 that Cindy just happened to be working in that particular Sunday.
Wow.
So within a season, we got married, and we just celebrated 25 years, June 20th.
Well, that must have been quite a conversation at the bar then.
The conversation was lengthy and pretty amazing. It's kind of interesting that nature brought us together, right? Because the flood, had no idea. And we're married in June, and we kind of live right alongside nature now.
Yes, you do. Yeah. What was it about the idea of doing winemaking, and then how were you inspired to do that, and what made you think that we could possibly really do this sort of thing?
So after we were married, a year later, we took a class at UC Davis called Emerging Varietals. And we really started to get into wine. We just really enjoyed how wine and food paired so well together, how they made each other better, kind of like how we hopefully make each other better. And just started doing a lot of research, and we wanted to do it differently. And differently for us means having food, having tableside, and that experience. So then once we found the property, the question is, what do you plant? What's going to work? We love Barbera, but we realized that maybe Barbera wasn't the right variety to plant.
And that leads to the second serendipitous situation. He's Dan Marca of Dancin Vineyards in Jacksonville in the Rogue Valley appellation of Southern Oregon. Dan continues.
So I was at a class at UC Davis, and I was asking around, who do I talk to? I want to plant Italians on my property in Oregon. And they said, hey, you've got to talk to this guy, Glenn McGordy. He's the Italian wizard. He knows about Italians. So I called Glenn's office in Ukiah, and he was out, and just so happened to be teaching a class in Southern Oregon the following day, a mile and a half from our site. And we had tickets for that particular class. We were enrolled. So we thought, Glenn McGordy, that name sounds familiar. Just there's something about that name. Come to find out, that first class we took a year after we were married at Davis was taught by Glenn McGordy.
Isn't that crazy?
It's crazy. So Glenn managed Anderson Valley and Mendocino County, where they do amazing Pinot Noir. So we took several trips down there. We met a lot of growers and did the research on our property. And the climate here, come to find out, we're actually about 1 to 2 degrees cooler than the Mid-Anderson Valley because we get shade here early in the day. So we knew that Pinot Noir was the variety to plant.
Right. But you are a fan of Italian varietals, so you found a source for your winery.
We did. We found a great source, so a couple of sources. Back in 2013, we sourced some Barbera, Sangiovese, and Nebbiolo, and we did our first blend. We call it the Tribute, as a tribute to our Southern Italian heritage. It was a great blend. It was seamless. It was delicious. In 2014, we started sourcing from John Pratt at Celestina Vineyard, just literally a few miles down the road, where he gets the heat units to be able to ripen Barbera and the other Italians really well. So we've been making a varietal-specific Barbera ever since 2014.
Do you think it's your Italian heritage that provided you the inspiration to get into winemaking? Was it something that was part of your family when you were growing up? Or?
So my grandmother, who passed just a couple of years ago at 103 years old, would take Marsala wine and crack an egg and blend it together, and that would be her breakfast. So wine was in the family around food, and she ultimately blessed this little venture that we got into and tasted our wines and approved of our wines. So that was important to us. So it's part of the culture.
What's Cindy's background?
So Cindy is, she's been in hospitality from early on. She's been a server for 30 years. She's a great home cook. And she actually started the kitchen here and ran the kitchen for the first 5 years and has since turned it over to a chef. So her mom was a really good, fine chef at home. So she's always been into good food and good wine.
You are nicely tucked here in what seems to be kind of a corner of this area here in Jacksonville. And you got a nice view of the valley out that way, and you have some what looks like interesting microclimates here on the property because there are some rolling hills and some flatlands and a wonderful spot for you.
So this spot is unique, so unique that we are in the middle of August now, pretty close to it, and we have yet to irrigate the main estate. So that kind of gives you an idea. You typically find Pinot in these areas that get some cloud cover or get some fog and that they're cooler. Mm-hmm. So what makes this site unique is we're high elevation, so we average 1,800 feet. We go up to 2,000 feet. We're north-northeast facing, and we shade early. And we're real careful with the resources that we have. And if we have water in the soil and there's moisture, there's no reason to water. And the last couple of years, we haven't watered until August 1st. And we may be able to ride this home without irrigating this year.
Wow, that's fantastic.
He's Dan Marca of Dancin Vineyards. They're just outside of Medford near the historic town of Jacksonville. I mentioned earlier that they're tucked into a corner of the foothills of the Cascade Mountains, and their production facility is built into the hillside. That allows them to use gravity flow, a softer method of moving the wine to and from the fermentation tanks, without the use of pumps. Most of the time.
We move wine when we can by gravity with the second winery building that we have, both built into the hillside, as you were saying, but also situated on the east side of the property. And because they're situated in the ground a little bit, they get shaded even earlier than the vineyard does. And we had made sure to situate the crush pad on the east side of the east-facing winery too. So we get a little bit of morning sun, but it's filtered through the trees. So that area stays pretty cool, pretty helpful.
From what I was reading, it seems like you operate Dancin here with a thoughtful mindset, with little intervention, with the winemaking and sustainable farming, while you consider yourselves the stewards of the land. And that's nice to see that. And it's something that certainly has been catching on across the industry, but you're doing it right.
It's really important to us. We utilize nature to help us out. If you look at our website and you look at the team, you'll see over the two columns of the team members, you'll see a beautiful sunrise from the east side of the valley here, and it's our managing partner. It's nature.
Right.
So we recognize that nature, is supreme here. I mean, we can have a hailstorm in 2 hours, and we just can respond to it. But that's why we have owl boxes on the property. It's why we have bat houses. So we utilize the tools that nature gives us to help us manage our farm. Our reds are all done with native yeast. We believe that the more you could use native yeast, the better the outcome can be. We also believe that the use of native yeast doesn't necessarily guarantee an outcome, so therefore the winemaker has to be more connected to the particular lots of wine that are being made. They're not made with a recipe. They're made with nature, and so far so good.
Yeah, I was going to say, of the hundreds of winery websites I've looked at in the last 20 years, I've never seen one that has Mother Nature as one of the team members. And it is absolutely true. You have her as the managing partner, but she certainly gets the last word, doesn't she? The
last word, the first word, and the middle word. It's so true. And it's just like with the water. You don't know what you're going to have from day to day. And again, it just encourages you to be more connected to what's happening, to just let nature do what nature does. Get out of the way, but be available. Because the one thing that the vines are very resilient. And the one thing the vines don't have is the benefit of a weather forecast. So we're able to then plan ahead, and maybe we need to water at a certain point, even though things look good today. We're basically stewards. We're shepherds. And we just take it one day at a time.
Yeah. Why don't you take me through the number of varieties that you work with? We know Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Barbera.
Yes. So in addition to those three, we do Zinfandel. We do Sangiovese. Just beautiful fruit with the little bitey tannins that you get with Sangiovese. We do port style too. We've been doing port style with Pinot Noir, the first two that we did in 12 and 15, and we were able to source some Tintacal and Touriga. So the current 2014 is made with the varieties of Portugal, and we just, by the way, made a port with Barbera. So we're looking forward to the release of that for 2019 vintage.
And I love port, so looking forward to trying at least one of those. And Syrah?
We do Syrah as well, sourced out of the Applegate, so close by. It's an interesting Syrah. It reminds me of just this. It's just so delicate. It's not a big, juicy Syrah. People love it because it's so different, but it's so approachable too.
So more of the cool climate in Syrah. That's the one thing about Anderson Valley is they grow Syrah there, but depending on where they're growing it, it can be a totally different wine from one another.
Absolutely.
Congratulations on some big scores on your 2017 Syrah. I saw Wine Enthusiast gave you a 92 and Editor's Choice, and a 97 and a double gold at the San Francisco Chronicle competition.
Absolutely. We've been very fortunate, very blessed. We just do the best we can, making the best wines we can as a result of the farming. We don't cut corners. It's real important that we stay true to who we are and to what we've been doing. And the results have been positive so far.
The winemaking, of course, is always the first and foremost thing that you're offering the public. But In this day and age, you got to have a good brand if you want to get noticed. And I tell you, you're killing it with your brand. I love the dancer that you utilize, the ballet or modern dancer with her flowing gown, and which, after all, when you look at it, is not a gown at all. It's a splash of wine.
Exactly.
It's so well done.
Thank you. You know, we did a label refresh in 2015. The original label had Dan and Cindy, or Dancin, in 2 different boxes. I was in a red box because of my type A-ness. Cindy was in a green box because she's a type Z and very laid back. And then we just we did a tasting, and this restaurateur suggested that we perhaps look at upgrading or refreshing the label. And we did, and we wanted to do something that you could notice from a distance. And after, you know, a lot of research and just a lot of effort, we decided to do the ballerina in the wine dress. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, staying true to who we are, so each wine dress matches the color palette of the wine.
Right.
If you look closely, you'll see where she's on point. There's a little bit of a shadow there, and that shadow is representative of, or a reflection of, all of the activities that happen on the vineyard floor and in the winery that culminate in the bottle of wine. All of the fanciful names are associated either with the source, the place, something to do with the wine. You know, so we have, you know, a wine called the Trotta. The Trotta is named after a commemorative dance they do in an ancient town in Greece. So it's our once-a-year barrel select that we do. So we have all of these different names that have a deeper meaning behind them.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I love it. Well, you sure have a lot happening here at Dancin, and you were just talking about the live music that you're doing again this evening. You do that a few nights a week, typically, and you have the pizza and other food here. It's quite a destination.
We've tried to create an experience here and just really share our hearts. The number one thing that Dancin offers is hospitality. The place, the wine, the food, the ambiance are all here to facilitate a good conversation and camaraderie between people. And we see that. And we see so many people just place their cell phones on the table or in their back pockets in favor of communication. And it's pretty nice. And there are several things that make me happy. One of which is when I kind of come out from behind the bar, when I'm actually pouring wine behind the bar, and I come outside and I just hear just this beautiful level of conversation that happens here. That's a big deal to me. That to me means success. It's just people having a good time, people getting to know each other, people enjoying the view and the magic of this Rogue Valley.
And even in this COVID period, there's plenty of space here. You have a lot of tables, and it is nice that you can still have live music.
Absolutely. And basically, when you come in, you're greeted by the host. You're seated at one of the tables. We maintain social distancing. We have 6 feet not only from the tables, but from the seating. And we are following the guidelines and just really happy to be able to be open and be serving.
Getting back to design, you said you were in construction. Did you have something to do with the design of this facility? Because it's nicely done.
We did. We actually had sketches of what we wanted this facility to be. But we know we don't have all the answers. So we solicited bids from different architects and actually had a residential contractor, because my background is in commercial construction, as a consultant here. And just to get the thoughts and ideas of different people and different experiences and different gifts. And one thing led to another, and we've been on, I think this is our 5th phase of expansion here.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've had numerous iterations since you opened. And
we have.
Quite a few in a short amount of time, really.
It's been, we just celebrated 8 years in May, and our 10th harvest. So it's amazing how quickly the years go.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Yeah, you're going to be sitting here at 75 saying the same thing.
I know, so true.
Do you have children?
We do. We have 3 kids, one of which was one of the first who helped us plant the vines here. And he went off to culinary school in Napa, did 2 years at the CIA, and then came back for a little while, and then went up to Portland and worked in Portland in hospitality. He has a heart for hospitality. Now he's back here. He manages the wine club, and he helps with hosting. And then we have another son who's getting married here on Monday, which is fantastic. He lives in Portland, and we have a daughter in Portland as well.
Oh. So they're interested in sticking around with the winery?
Our youngest son definitely is. The other two love coming here, but my daughter's a vet, and my son's into retail, and they enjoy drinking the wine, and they visit when they can. They love being here.
Yeah. Well, they'll have the connection at least.
Absolutely.
As a source for good wine.
During our visit to the Rogue Valley, my wife and I were planning on seeing Crater Lake, which was incredible, and Dan filled us in on some of the other things you can do in Southern Oregon.
We have proximity to Crater Lake, proximity to the Rogue River, proximity to the Brit festivals, where you can see Smokey Robinson to Kiss or Pat Benatar. You've got Oregon Shakespeare Festival. You have snow skiing. There are so many things to do close by.
Yeah, and proximity to California. I'm sure you draw a lot of people up here from Northern California.
We do. We see a lot of people from the Bay Area, from Sacramento, from Redding.
Yeah, well, good. Well, I hope it continues.
We do, too.
And I have to say, it was nice of John Pratt to give me your name. He's with the Wine Growers Association. He was unable to meet with me, but he said, talk with Dan over at Dancin. But I wanted to tell you, we were planning on coming here anyway, because when we saw your website, we had to visit. So
thank you.
It's nice to be here.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Dan took good care of us while we were there. He had us try so much of their wonderful culinary offerings. At about 4 p.m., that ended up being it for the evening. We were stuffed. And what was cool was the number of people who were there by then. It appears many visit the place as a happy hour spot, all at safe distances. Check out Dancin Vineyards at dancin.com. No G at the end of Dancin. It's Dan and Cindy's names put together, Dan and Sin. Up next, a guy who's been working the vineyard since he was a kid in Southern Oregon. I sit with Eric of Weisinger Vineyards as our travels continue on the Wine Road.
The historic Mount View Hotel and Spa is a 33-room, family-owned boutique hotel located in the heart of downtown Calistoga, California. This distinctive hotel features original architectural elements complemented by Art Deco interiors. Welcoming amenities include 2 restaurants, Amaro Italian Kitchen and Johnny's, a full-service luxury spa, the Indy Blue Salon, a beautiful pool, Mineral Springs Jet Spa, lounge areas, and this summer, a safe, enjoyable outdoor movie venue, the Moonshine Theater. A stay at the Mount View Hotel and Spa is not only enriching for the soul, you can change the world while you sleep. Their Change the World While You Sleep program contributed 50% of their profits to children, health, women's, and environmental causes. Currently, the Mount View is hosting dinner and a movie fundraising events to support local nonprofits. For the schedule of movies and more information on Wine Country's most unique hotel and spa, visit mountviewhotel.com.
On the Wine Road continues. I'm Jeff Davis, featuring interviews from Oregon's Rogue Valley, not far north of the California border. On the eastern side of Ashland is Weisinger Family Vineyards. Eric Weisinger's father got the bug to make wine in the early 70s. He purchased a farm in 1978, and with young 9-year-old Eric and his younger sister's assistance, they planted a vineyard of Gewürztraminer, and Eric's been in the business ever since. Eric and I sat in his production facility at 2 tables, each of us with our own microphones. You'll hear us knock the tables a few times, especially when Eric is opening wine bottles. I started by asking him what motivated his father to move his young family from Texas to Oregon to follow his dream to get into the wine business.
Well, my father's always been a passionate guy, and he had been interested in wine from a very young age. In his former life, he was a Presbyterian minister, and there was an opportunity for him at a church here in Ashland. And when he came to Ashland, he drove around, saw a for sale sign on this piece of property with 10 acres, and thought maybe this is going to be the place where he could have his vineyard grapes, which is something he had always had an interest in.
Mm-hmm. I can see why it was captured by this property.
Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of property.
Yeah. So you spent a majority of your life learning all aspects of the industry.
Well, definitely starting at a very young age, learning about growing grapes. Mm-hmm. To this day, I can honestly say, to be honest, it's not my favorite part. It's a lot of work, but it is a necessary part, obviously. We didn't begin producing until 1988, and that was I had experimented with some home wines in probably junior high.
Oh. Okay.
Wasn't very successful at it, but,
Is it because you hadn't developed your palate yet at that 14-year-old age?
I was working on it, though. I was working on it.
So here's the question I was telling you about. Did you find it a blessing to be brought into the business by your father, or do you quietly curse him for dragging you into the business?
That's a tough question. You can go deep on that. I think that I look at it as a blessing for sure, because there was always a choice of, do I want to do this? And if I wanted to, then the opportunity was there. If I didn't, there was also the support to go pursue something else, anything else.
Right.
My parents were definitely of the mindset that if you have the opportunity to do something that you love, regardless of what it is.
I'm happy to hear that. Many winemakers say that, who come from winemaking families. They've always had the option to go off and do whatever they wanted. And usually, if there are several children, sometimes only one sticks with the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't unless your sisters got married, I didn't notice your sisters on the website.
No, they don't have anything to do with it, and they're quite happy with that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they like the wine.
They do, yeah. They do indeed.
Let's talk about the grape varieties grown here in Southern Oregon. Pinot Noir is the predominant grape that's planted, but there seem to be more warmer climate grapes growing as well here, especially now. I imagine you've seen an expansion of varieties being planted in the time that you spent here.
Absolutely. I think the total acreage when we first planted in this area was easily under 100 acres. And it's well over several thousand acres currently. There has been, in probably the last 15 years, a lot of plantings of Tempranillo, Malbec, Grenache, Syrah, Viognier, Roussanne, and that's. I would say that the path that Southern Oregon and specifically the Rogue Valley has taken is sort of typical for the development of a wine region. Mm. Usually, a wine region starts off just growing a few things that are safe, and this farmer over here is growing it because he saw this other farmer over there growing it. Okay, that'll probably work. And then at a certain point of maturity, the region gets adventurous. There's one or two people that come in and plant something like Tannat or, something else.
Yeah,
and
Roussanne,
exactly. And that's how a region develops and figures out what they really should be growing.
I suppose once you get into larger vineyards as an owner and a grower, then you can experiment a little bit more. You don't want to do so earlier on, but
no, it's funny though. When we opened in '88, the year prior, 1987, we planted a very small block of Italian varieties. We planted Rufosco, Sangiovese, Primitivo, and Nebbiolo. None of which worked.
Really?
So
you see some Sangiovese. That seems to be growing fairly well now.
Yep. And it's like for us on this side here, it just wasn't a good fit.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that, too. I imagine a lot of the other places that you source your non-estate wines from are in a variety of different microclimates and elevations.
They are, yet they're also within about 2 miles. So that's one of the things that we focus on here is producing wines that are grown almost directly in the Ashland area.
Okay, great. But so you got quite a list then.
Yeah.
You're lucky to.
Yeah.
But different microclimates, I imagine, too.
Absolutely.
What is your case production now?
So the case production for our brand is about 2,000 cases, and that fluctuates. As a facility, we're doing close to 10. There's quite a bit of contract work that we do.
Custom crush, such we were talking about. You have a Texas client.
We do, yeah. I think we're the only place in Oregon that produces Texas wine.
Anything to do with your father's background?
It absolutely does, yeah. So, I mean, his family's all from Texas, so we have deep roots in Texas. And so we had a longtime family friend who got into the wine business about 3-4 years ago, and we've been producing his wine.
Oh, great. That's another burgeoning region, and they're finally seeming to getting a handle on what grows down there. And they're still figuring it out.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think that 2 things have been happening in Texas, in particular the hill country. One is that growers are figuring out what to grow and how to grow it, and then wine makers are figuring out how to produce it. So the quality of what's coming out of the Texas Hill Country today is incredible.
Are they incredibly impressed with what you're doing with their grapes, though?
They aren't disappointed. So
Good. Do you want to pour something else real quick?
sure, yeah, absolutely. Let's try a Roussan since we were talking about that.
I'd love to try your Roussan, yeah.
We did a Roussan for the first time in 2014. I've always had a sort of an affection for Rhone whites. We began producing Viognier, I believe, in 2006. And Roussan I tried once in 2014, and I loved it. And in 2015, I couldn't get any of it because everyone else had the same idea. Wasn't able really to secure any Roussan until just last year. So this was also done 100% in barrel. So the reason why we do that is we try and pick when we have lots of acid. So these grapes are being picked at 22.5, maybe 23. But we do the barrel fermentation so we can do aging on the lees. We stir the lees because we're also trying to develop texture and body. And so that's what we try and do with all of our whites. It's plenty of acid, but yet have that depth, that roundness.
That's great, yeah.
So that's the goal anyway. Whether or not we accomplish it each year is,
That's where the art comes in.
That's exactly, yeah.
You served us Sauvignon Blanc initially, and I wanted to ask you about your time spent in New Zealand.
Yeah.
A few years after you started, after you became winemaker, you started going down there for harvest.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's why you have a pretty extensive white wine list today here at Weisinger.
It is. So I took over the wine production here around 98, 99, and 2007 was when I began going down to New Zealand, working harvest there, and did harvest in Australia also. But there was something about Marlborough in New Zealand that just was a really good fit, and ended up doing about 7 years there.
Yeah. And that's primarily Sauv Blanc, or do you have other varieties?
Yeah, so primarily Sauv Blanc, a little bit of Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, quite a bit of Pinot Noir, which people don't realize. But definitely, I think that you can see the influence of New Zealand on our wines. I remember when I first arrived there, the winemaker who picked me up from the airport took me straight out to a vineyard. And we walked out there, and I pulled off a grape, Sauvignon Blanc, and ate it. And that grape tasted like New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc that I tasted back in the States. It was really the first time that I felt like I was tasting true terroir.
Huh.
It was eye-opening.
And that was probably very close to harvest.
Yeah. It was in March.
So
it was
a
ready.
grape that was ready to go.
Ready to go.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Did that change your winemaking style with any of the reds as well, or?
What we focused on was Pinot Noir, so it definitely had an impact on how I produce Pinot. It helped me to develop a sort of information or database for clones of Pinot. Down there, they really focus on whether it's 114, 115, Pommard, Abel, which is a clone that we don't have up here. So I really had not paid attention to Pinot Noir clones in the same way until I was there.
What did you have here on the property?
So what we have here on the property is clone 777, and we chose that because it is a clone that does well in heat.
Mm-hmm. That's our favorite.
It is? Okay.
If people can have a favorite clone.
You absolutely can have a favorite clone. Yeah. I'm kind of a toss between 777 and Pommard.
I thought you were going to say that. Yeah, she likes Pommard as well. It's a little too earthy for me, which grows really well up here in Oregon.
Yeah.
It's well used up here.
It does.
And I kind of like a little bit of fruitier Pinot Noir than she does, but that's okay.
Yeah. To each their own.
We'll drink them all.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And we do. I see your tasting room hosts events. Now, are those on hold now, or is there a way that you're able to get around it from the state's safety protocols?
No, they're all on hold. We just sort of felt that we wanted to err on the side of caution. So we do a bit of live music. We do winemaker dinners, a number of other special events. But this year, it's a very dynamic situation, so we just decided to play it safe.
Sure. You offer some tempting food plates as well. And one thing I don't see often on winery websites are kombucha and lager and IPA beer.
Yeah, that was a staff pick, so they like it.
But you sell beer too here?
Yeah, absolutely. Well? Yeah. Well, the guys who work in production, we're all big beer drinkers.
Yeah.
In fact, it was once said that it takes, in Oregon anyway, it takes a case of beer to produce a case of wine.
In California, I think it takes good beer to make great wine.
Yeah, exactly. So, I would agree with that also.
Either way, beer is a major component of winemaking.
Yep.
And it's nice that you can offer that to people whose personal preferences are,
Well, and what we do with our beer choices is they're all from local breweries here in Ashland.
I was wondering if you had a personal relationship with them or if it's just something you decided to do.
Yeah, well, yes and yes. So, I mean, the brewer here in Ashland who we work with, I've known for 20 years. So,
yeah, good. And your Vineyard Cottage, is that something that you're still leasing out?
Absolutely.
Or no?
Yeah,
Okay, you
yeah. In fact, it was interesting when earlier in the year we didn't have any bookings at all, and so we just sort of chose to close it and wait and see what would happen. We opened for bookings again in June, and we've been booked almost every week.
Oh,
so
great.
it's been.
Yeah, your Vineyard Cottage. I mean, it's a lovely looking space.
Yeah, it's actually the original farmhouse on the property. The property has been a farm since the 1880s, and the cottage was built in the early 1920s. There's an older structure on the property which we just refer to as the rock house. It's built of rock, and it's 10 feet by 12 building, and we think it was built in the late 1880s.
I wish we would have planned ahead of time. We would have probably snagged that up.
Yeah.
Because it has all the touches you want in a nice vineyard cottage.
Well, and there are very few places in Southern Oregon where you can stay at a house or have your own house in a vineyard.
As their website states, the quaint cottage is nestled next to a quiet Pinot Noir vineyard, a perfect romantic getaway for two. You can see it on their website, weisingers.com. weisingers.com. Following our conversation about his white wines, I asked of the red varieties, which does he find most intriguing to work with?
Probably the three that I've selected are Tempranillo, Malbec, and Grenache. The Tempranillo is what we have planted here. The Malbec comes from a vineyard that is one that I've worked with for probably 12 plus years. Grenache, this vineyard for us is relatively new. We've only been working with it since 2013. This will be the third Grenache that we produced from it. But it is the Grenache vineyard that we feel has the greatest potential, and that's the reason why we're doing it. So why don't I open up the Tempranillo?
All right. While you're doing that, based on where you are and where you're getting these from, would you say that these are cool climate versions of these varieties or more of a warmer climate version?
So one of the unique things about Southern Oregon is depending on the year, because we have cooler years, warmer years. We've been in a trend since about 2015 of warmer years. So I would say that for these three, so we have a 2017, 16, and a 17, 16 being the Malbec, all of those would be warm climate examples.
Because Grenache especially can be a light wine. But it can also be like the Spanish Garnacha.
Exactly.
Nice, robust, and I love those kind of Grenache wines.
As do I. Our Grenache isn't as full-bodied as something that you would get from Spain, but the color, this Grenache actually has quite a bit of color.
Okay.
So, but like I said, we've only been working with Grenache since 2013. And so 7 years is just, it goes by like that. It's not really that much time.
Uh-huh. But you're getting a handle on it.
We are, 1 year at a time.
That's how it goes. And as your website states, I hear a lot. You're always learning.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I used to think that, I used to be aware of how much I was unaware of in wine. It's like, boy, there's so much I don't know. I've now come to a point that I have no idea how much I am unaware of.
That's like when you become a fan of wine, in my case, learning about it to talk about it, you don't know a whole lot. And then the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. There's so much more to learn. And that's what's interesting and exciting about the wine industry. And whether you're just a consumer or you're in the business, it's really interesting to open your mind and try to absorb as much as you possibly can.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that element of it that every year is different. Because every year is different. It's one of those. I think there are just a handful of what I like to call the absolute truths in wine, and the absolute truths are things that they just simply are. You can't argue them; they just are that way. And one of them is you can never produce the same wine twice.
Pretty much,
you just can't.
Yeah,
and because every year is different. Mm-hmm. And because every year is different, there are going to be new things to discover, learn.
Yeah.
If this was getting up and going to work and doing the same things every day, I wouldn't do it.
Uh-huh. You'd go somewhere where you wouldn't have to work quite as hard and make probably the same amount of money,
exactly.
Not even more.
Yeah. Well, someone said, Professor UC Davis said to me one time that wine making is the art of the intelligent compromise. And it took me a few years to figure out what he meant, but when I did figure it out, I realized that when you aren't in control of a situation, you have to compromise. And in wine, the thing that has the most control is the weather, something that you will never have any control of. Mm-hmm. So by nature, you're always going to be compromising. The art's to do it as intelligently as possible.
Yeah.
And it's those compromises and uncertainties that keep it interesting enough for the winemakers and growers to continue to grapple with it year after year. He's Eric Weisinger, winemaker, general manager, and all-round good guy of Weisinger Family Vineyard in Ashland, Oregon. See more at weisingers.com. We sure enjoyed our road trip up to the region. If you choose to go, I highly suggest visiting Dancin Vineyards and Weisingers. You won't be disappointed. That brings this week's venture to an end. Find more interviews at onthewineroad.com. Find me on Instagram as JD Wine Road and on Facebook as On the Wine Road. As the world continues to open up, enjoy your travels wherever they may take you, and I'll continue to provide options as I make my way on the Wine Road. I'm Jeff Davis.